The day Blessing Okoro lost his wife, he didn't raise his voice, fight back, or beg for another chance. He simply stood in silence as Amara and her wealthy family laughed at the man they called a failure. With a worn travel bag in one hand and a broken heart in the other, he walked away from the only home he had ever known. None of them noticed the elderly stranger watching from across the street. 7 days later, that quiet goodbye would become the greatest regret of their lives. Have you ever seen kindness mistaken for weakness? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. If you enjoy emotional stories about hope, justice, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe for more. Blessing Okoro had never believed that wealth made a person important. Growing up in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Lagos, Nigeria, he had learned a different lesson from his late father. Every evening, after repairing old motorcycles and worn-out taxis, his father would wipe the grease from his hands and repeat the same words. A man's greatest possession is not what he owns. It is who he remains when life gives him nothing. Those words stayed with Blessing long after his parents were gone. At 31 years old, he owned very little. He rented a modest one-bedroom apartment with cracked walls and a leaking roof during the rainy season. His wardrobe consisted mostly of faded work shirts, patched jeans, and a pair of boots that had been repaired more times than replaced. Every morning before sunrise, he cycled across Lagos to the neighborhood garage where he worked as a mechanic. The garage was small. Old engines filled every corner. The smell of oil clung to every surface. Customers came because they trusted Blessing. He never charged for repairs people didn't need. He never replaced working parts simply to earn more money. If a struggling taxi driver could only afford half the repair cost, Blessing often accepted half without complaint. His employer sometimes shook his head. "You'll never become rich like this." Blessing simply smiled. "Maybe not, but I'll sleep well tonight." People respected him. Unfortunately, respect could not pay rising rent or buy expensive gifts. 3 years earlier, during a church youth outreach program, Blessing had met Amara Okafor. She was beautiful without trying. Her laughter filled every conversation. She spoke kindly to everyone, whether they were wealthy professionals or street vendors selling fruit outside the church gate. Back then, nothing seemed to matter, except the warmth they felt whenever they were together. Amara admired Blessing's humility. Blessing admired her compassion. Their relationship grew naturally. They spent weekends walking along the marina waterfront, sharing roasted corn from roadside sellers, because expensive restaurants were beyond their budget. Sometimes they dreamed aloud. One day, they would own a small house. One day, they would raise children who understood honesty better than luxury. One day, life would become easier. When Blessing finally proposed with a simple silver ring he had saved months to buy, Amara cried with happiness. She said yes before he finished asking. Their wedding was modest. Church members decorated the small hall with handmade flowers. Neighbors cooked food together. Friends sang louder than the old speakers could play music. Nobody wore designer clothing. Nobody cared. It was one of the happiest days of Blessing's life. For nearly a year after their marriage, happiness seemed enough. Then everything slowly began to change. It started quietly. Amara received an invitation to attend her cousin's engagement party at her parents' luxurious home. Blessing couldn't attend because an emergency repair kept him working late. She went alone. That evening reopened a door she had unknowingly closed years before. Her father, Chief Edwin Okafor, welcomed successful businessmen, doctors, politicians, and wealthy entrepreneurs into his mansion. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Elegant dresses sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Every conversation revolved around promotions, investments, and expensive vacations abroad. Someone eventually asked about Blessing. "What business does your husband own?" Amara hesitated. "He's a mechanic." The conversation paused for only a second. It was enough. Kelvin Okafor, her older brother, laughed loudly. A mechanic. You married someone who repairs broken engines. Several guests chuckled politely. Another woman whispered something that made others smile. Chief Edwin forced a pleasant expression, but disappointment settled across his face. My daughter deserved someone with bigger ambitions. The words stayed with Amara long after she returned home. Blessing greeted her at the apartment door with her favorite fried plantains. She smiled, but something inside her had shifted. Weeks passed. The comments continued. Her mother, Grace Okafor, began calling almost every evening. You still have time to think about your future. A beautiful woman shouldn't waste her life struggling. Love doesn't pay school fees. Love doesn't buy houses. Love doesn't build security. At first, Amara defended Blessing. He works hard. Grace sighed. Working hard isn't the same as succeeding. Those conversations slowly planted seeds of doubt. Blessing noticed the changes before Amara admitted them. She stopped laughing as often. She compared their apartment with photos she saw online. She began noticing things she once ignored. The leaking ceiling, the unreliable electricity, the old furniture, the worn curtains, the aging bicycle parked outside. One evening, the power failed again during dinner. They finished eating under candlelight. Blessing joked that candle-lit dinners were romantic. Months earlier, Amara would have laughed. Instead, she quietly said, I'm tired of pretending this life is enough. Blessing looked at her carefully. What happened? She avoided his eyes. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. From then on, every inconvenience became another reminder of what she believed she lacked. When neighbors purchased new cars, she noticed. When former classmates posted luxury vacations online, she noticed. When relatives bought larger homes, she noticed. She noticed everything except the husband waking before dawn every day, trying to build a better future. Blessing started accepting extra repair jobs. Sometimes he returned home after midnight. His hands became rougher. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes. He skipped lunch to save money. Without telling Amara, he had begun saving toward a down payment for a better apartment. He imagined surprising her. He imagined seeing her smile again. He never realized she had already begun measuring his worth against people with fortunes built over decades. One Saturday afternoon, Blessing repaired an elderly taxi driver's engine free of charge after discovering the man had no money left. The grateful driver insisted on paying later. Blessing refused. As he walked home carrying his toolbox, he bought a single white rose from an elderly flower seller. It cost almost nothing. He believed small gestures kept love alive. When he handed it to Amara that evening, she forced a smile. Thank you. She placed the flower in the glass of water without looking at it again. Blessing felt something break inside him, not because she disliked the flower, because she no longer saw the heart behind it. Late that night, while Blessing slept after another exhausting day, Amara stood alone by the window. Her phone vibrated. It was another message from Kelvin. Family dinner next Saturday. Dad insists both of you attend. Don't embarrass us by making excuses. A few moments later, another message arrived from Grace. Your father has something important to discuss with Blessing. Be there at noon. Amara stared at the glowing screen for several minutes. Something about the messages made her uneasy. She remembered the laughter, the whispers, the disappointed expressions. She knew her parents had never accepted her marriage completely. Blessing woke briefly and noticed her standing there. Is everything all right? She quickly locked her phone. Yes. He smiled gently. Good. We'll go together. Maybe this time your father and I can finally understand each other better. Amara looked away without answering. Deep inside, she feared that the upcoming family gathering would not bring understanding. It would become the beginning of something neither of them could ever undo. Saturday arrived with bright sunshine over Lagos, but the warmth in the air never reached Blessing's heart. He stood in front of the small mirror inside their apartment, carefully buttoning his cleanest blue shirt. The fabric had faded from years of washing, yet he had ironed it until every crease disappeared. His black trousers were old but neatly pressed, and his polished shoes reflected the morning light coming through the window. He looked at himself for a long moment. He knew he could never compete with the expensive suits worn by Amara's relatives. Still, he wanted to show respect. When he turned around, Amara was already dressed in an elegant cream-colored dress that her mother had bought for her months earlier. Gold earrings sparkled beneath her neatly styled hair. She looked beautiful. Blessing smiled. "You look amazing." Amara forced a polite smile. "Thank you." There was no warmth behind the words. The drive to the Okafor family mansion was unusually quiet. Blessing tried several times to start a conversation. "How is your cousin settling into married life?" No answer. "I heard your father recently expanded his company." Only a short nod. He finally gave up and stared out the window as Lagos passed by. Luxury stores replaced neighborhood markets. Tall office buildings replaced crowded streets. The houses grew larger with every passing kilometer. When they finally reached the Okafor estate, 2 security guards opened the massive iron gate before their taxi even stopped. Inside, luxury cars filled the driveway. A black Range Rover, 2 white Mercedes-Benz SUVs, a silver Bentley parked beneath the shade of a large tree. Blessing quietly paid the taxi driver before stepping onto the polished stone entrance. He instinctively reached for Amara's hand. She hesitated. Then she slowly pulled her hand away. It was a small movement, but it hurt more than words. Inside, the mansion buzzed with conversation. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. Soft classical music floated through spacious rooms. Men discussed investments, while women admired expensive jewelry and designer handbags. Blessing immediately noticed that almost every guest wore clothing worth more than several months of his salary. Chief Edwin spotted them first. "There they are." His voice carried across the room. Everyone turned. Dozens of eyes settled on Blessing. Chief Edwin walked forward with a practiced smile. "Welcome." He shook Amara's hand warmly before offering Blessing only a brief nod. "I'm glad you finally made time." Blessing smiled politely. "Thank you for inviting us." Grace approached next. She hugged her daughter tightly. "My beautiful girl." Then she glanced toward Blessing. "You've been keeping busy at the garage." Blessing answered honestly. "Yes, we've had many customers recently." Grace gave a thin smile. "I'm sure that's nice." Kelvin appeared carrying a glass of juice. He looked Blessing up and down. So the famous mechanic finally arrived. Several nearby relatives laughed quietly. Blessing remained calm. "It's good to see you too, Kelvin." Kelvin circled him slowly. "I have to admit something." Blessing waited. "You clean up better than I expected." Another round of laughter spread across the room. Blessing smiled politely. "I thought family gatherings deserved my best." Kelvin smirked. "I'm not talking about effort." He touched Blessing's sleeve. "I mean, it's impressive how old clothes can still look decent." More laughter followed. Blessing noticed Amara standing only a few feet away. She heard every word. She said nothing. An older uncle stepped closer. "So, young man," Blessing turned respectfully, "what exactly do you repair?" "Mostly engines." "Cars." "Cars, motorcycles, small generators." The uncle nodded. "Interesting." Before Blessing could continue, Another guest interrupted. So, you spend your days covered in grease. Someone nearby chuckled. Another added, no wonder his hands look like that. Blessing looked down. Tiny scars covered his fingers after years of honest work. He had never been ashamed of them. Until that moment. Lunch was announced shortly afterward. Guests gathered around an enormous dining table covered with expensive dishes. Blessing quietly waited for everyone else before taking his seat. A house servant poured drinks. Kelvin leaned back comfortably. So Blessing. Yes, how much does a mechanic actually earn these days? The room became noticeably quieter. Blessing answered honestly. It depends on the month. So, Kelvin smiled. Not enough. Several guests laughed again. Blessing remained composed. I earn enough to pay my bills. Chief Edwin placed his fork down. Do you? The question hung in the air. Blessing met his eyes. I do my best. Chief Edwin folded his hands. My daughter grew up in comfort. I know. She attended excellent schools. Yes. She never worried about food or shelter. Blessing nodded. I appreciate everything you've done for her. Chief Edwin leaned forward. Can you honestly promise she'll enjoy the same life with you? Silence. Blessing answered carefully. I can't promise wealth. A few relatives exchanged amused glances. But I can promise honesty. No one spoke. I can promise loyalty. Still silence. I can promise that every decision I make will protect her. Grace sighed softly. Those promises don't pay mortgages. Kelvin laughed. They don't buy luxury cars either. Another relative joined in. Or vacations. Blessing looked toward Amara. Surely now she would say something. Instead, she lowered her eyes to her plate. His heart became heavier. Chief Edwin spoke again. I've built businesses for 40 years. I respect that. I understand success. Blessing nodded. I'm sure you do. The older man shook his head. But I don't understand why an intelligent young woman would choose a man with no ambition. Blessing answered quietly. I have ambition. Kelvin laughed loudly. Really? What is it? Owning 2 repair shops instead of 1. Several guests burst into laughter. Blessing allowed them to finish. My ambition is building an honest life. Kelvin shrugged. That sounds like something poor people say. The words struck harder than expected. Blessing looked once more toward Amara. Their eyes met briefly. He silently pleaded for support. Anything. 1 sentence. 1 word. Instead, Amara slowly looked away. Grace reached across the table and gently touched her daughter's hand. You deserve security. Chief Edwin nodded. A husband should elevate his wife's life. Kelvin added, not drag her backward. Blessing took a slow breath. He refused to become angry. He refused to insult anyone. He simply asked one question. Amara. The room became still. He looked directly at his wife. Do you believe I've been holding you back? Her lips trembled slightly. For several seconds she said nothing. Blessing waited patiently. Then in a voice barely above a whisper she spoke. I don't know anymore. The words hit harder than shouting. Blessing stared at her in disbelief. She continued. I used to believe love was enough. Another long silence followed. But now, she struggled to finish. I don't want to spend the rest of my life worrying about money. Tears gathered in Blessing's eyes, but he blinked them away before anyone noticed. Kelvin smiled with satisfaction. Grace gently squeezed Amara's hand. Chief Edwin leaned back without saying a word. The message had already been delivered. Blessing realized that he had not come to a family lunch. He had walked into a carefully prepared judgment, and the only person whose voice truly mattered had quietly chosen the other side. No one spoke after Amara's confession. The dining room, which had echoed with laughter only moments earlier, fell into an uncomfortable silence. The crystal glasses, polished silverware, and elegant decorations suddenly seemed cold and distant. Blessing remained, seated, his hands resting quietly on the edge of the table. He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed anymore. He simply felt something inside him slowly giving way. Chief Edwin cleared his throat. "I believe honesty is always better than pretending." Blessing looked at him calmly. "I agree." The older man nodded. "Then let us be honest." Grace folded her napkin neatly before placing it beside her plate. "My daughter deserves stability." Kelvin leaned back with a satisfied smile. "She deserves a husband people can respect." Blessing answered without raising his voice. "Respect isn't measured by a paycheck." Kelvin chuckled. "That's exactly what someone without money would say." A few relatives laughed again, though more quietly this time. The atmosphere had changed. Even those who had enjoyed the jokes earlier now sensed they were witnessing something far more serious. Chief Edwin folded his hands. "Blessing, when you asked to marry my daughter, I opposed the idea." "I know. I only agreed because Amara insisted she loved you." Blessing nodded. "I appreciated that you eventually accepted us." Chief Edwin shook his head. "I tolerated the marriage." The words landed heavily. "I hoped you would eventually prove me wrong." Blessing listened without interruption. "But after 3 years, nothing has changed." Blessing finally spoke. "I've never stopped trying." "I don't question your effort." Chief Edwin's voice remained calm. "I question your ability." Across the table, Amara kept staring at her untouched plate. Blessing wished she would look at him. She never did. Grace spoke gently, almost as if offering kindness. "Nobody is saying you're a bad man." Blessing gave a small nod. "I understand. You're honest. Thank you. You're hard-working. I appreciate that. But honesty alone cannot build the future my daughter deserves." Blessing looked directly at her. "What kind of future does she deserve?" Grace answered immediately. "A comfortable one." Kelvin added, "A successful one." Another uncle spoke. "A respected one." Blessing listened to each answer. Then he quietly asked, "And if comfort comes without love?" Nobody answered. "And if success comes without loyalty?" Still silence. "And if respect comes only because of money?" Chief Edwin sighed. "You speak beautifully." Blessing lowered his eyes. "I simply speak what I believe." The older man stood from his chair. "I think today's discussion has reached its conclusion." Several relatives also stood, sensing lunch was over. Guests slowly drifted toward the garden outside, leaving only the immediate family in the dining room. Blessing remained seated. Amara still hadn't looked at him. Finally, Chief Edwin turned toward his daughter. "Amara." She raised her head. "This decision belongs to you." Blessing felt his heartbeat quicken. "I will never force my daughter to remain in an unhappy marriage." Grace nodded in agreement. "You deserve peace." Kelvin crossed his arms. "You've sacrificed enough." Blessing wanted to speak. Instead, he remained silent. If Amara still loved him, no speech would be necessary. If she didn't, no speech would change her heart. Amara slowly stood. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked at Blessing for the first time that afternoon. There had once been warmth in those eyes. Today there was only uncertainty. "I'm tired," Blessing answered softly. "I know. I'm tired of struggling." I know. I'm tired of worrying about every bill. Blessing swallowed hard. I know. A tear rolled down her cheek. I don't think I can do this anymore. The room became perfectly still. Blessing stared at her, not because the words surprised him, because he realized she had already made her decision long before today. She continued, I think, her voice broke, we should separate. No one interrupted. Grace quietly embraced her daughter. Kelvin looked away with a satisfied expression. Chief Edwin remained expressionless. Blessing closed his eyes for just a second. When he opened them again, there was sadness, but there was also peace. He slowly stood. If that's what you truly want. Amara couldn't answer. Then I won't force you to stay. Another tear slid down her face. Blessing reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around the simple silver wedding ring he had worn every day since their marriage. He looked at it carefully. It had never been expensive. It had represented every promise he had made. He gently removed it, without drama, without anger, without accusation. He walked toward Amara and placed the ring into her open palm. I bought this when I had almost nothing. His voice remained steady. And I gave it to the woman who believed almost nothing was enough. Amara lowered her head. Blessing smiled sadly. I hope one day you find the life you're looking for. He turned toward Chief Edwin. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your family. The older man said nothing. Blessing looked at Grace. Thank you for every meal you've shared with me. She avoided his eyes. Finally, he looked at Kelvin. I hope life is always as kind to you as you expect it to be. Kelvin frowned, unsure how to respond. Blessing picked up his small travel bag, the same worn bag he had brought with him that morning. Everything he owned fit inside it. He walked slowly toward the front door. No one tried to stop him. Outside, the afternoon sun had begun to fade behind scattered clouds. The driveway remained filled with expensive cars. Blessing paused for a moment before stepping through the open gate. He took one final look at the mansion. 3 years earlier, he had entered those gates believing he was joining a family. Today, he left understanding he had never truly been accepted. As he started walking down the quiet street, he heard footsteps behind him. For one hopeful second, he thought it might be Amara. He turned. It was only one of the house servants. The elderly woman hurried toward him, carrying a small paper bag. Sir. Blessing smiled gently. You don't have to call me sir. She handed him the bag. I packed some food. Blessing looked inside. Rice, chicken, a bottle of water. He smiled warmly. Thank you. The woman lowered her voice. I've worked for this family for 20 years. Blessing listened. I've met many rich people, she paused, but very few good people. His eyes softened. I'll pray for you. Blessing nodded gratefully. And I'll pray for you too. She watched him disappear down the road until he became only a small figure carrying a worn travel bag beneath the fading afternoon sky. Across the street, an elderly man sitting inside a dark blue sedan quietly lowered the newspaper he had been pretending to read. He had watched everything. The insults, the rejection, the dignity with which Blessing had walked away. The driver looked into the rearview mirror. Should we leave, sir? The old man continued watching Blessing disappear into the distance. A thoughtful smile slowly appeared on his face. No, he spoke calmly. Follow him. The sedan's engine started quietly. Keeping a respectful distance, it slowly pulled away from the curb. Blessing never noticed the car behind him. He believed he was walking alone into an uncertain future. He had no idea that the man following him was about to change the course of his entire life. Blessing walked for nearly an hour before the weight in his legs finally forced him to stop. The streets of Lagos were as alive as ever. Street vendors shouted prices over the roar of traffic. Yellow buses squeezed through impossible spaces. Motorcycles darted between cars with practiced confidence. Children laughed outside small corner shops. Life continued exactly as it had the day before. Only Blessing's world had changed. He sat on an old concrete bench beside a small public park and placed his worn travel bag beside him. For the first time since leaving the Okafor mansion, he allowed himself to breathe. He looked at the silver mark left on his finger where his wedding ring had rested for 3 years. The mark remained. The marriage did not. He closed his eyes. The memories arrived one after another. Amara laughing during their first walk together. The tiny apartment they had proudly called home. Their first Christmas with homemade decorations. The promises they had whispered before sleeping. Then came the memories of that afternoon. The laughter. The silence. The moment she chose not to stand beside him. A sharp pain settled deep inside his chest. He wasn't angry. He simply mourned the woman he believed had once loved him more than comfort. After several quiet minutes, his phone vibrated. The screen displayed the name of his employer, Mr. Hassan. Blessing answered immediately. "Good afternoon, sir." "Blessing, where are you?" "Near Victoria Island." "I've been calling." "I'm sorry." There was a brief silence. "I heard what happened." Blessing smiled faintly. "News travels fast." "It wasn't from gossip." Blessing waited. "Your neighbor came by the garage looking for you." Blessing lowered his eyes. "I see." Mr. Hassan spoke carefully. "I wish I could offer you more hours." "You've already done enough for me." The garage is struggling." Blessing understood. Several larger repair centers had opened nearby during the past year. Customers had become fewer. "I'm grateful for everything." Mr. Hassan sighed. "If you need somewhere to stay tonight." Blessing interrupted gently. "I'll find a place." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Another pause followed. Then Mr. Hassan quietly said, "I've employed many mechanics." Blessing listened. "You're the only one I'd trust with my own family." Emotion tightened Blessing's throat. "Thank you." "I mean it." "I know." After ending the call, Blessing placed the phone back into his pocket. He still had a little savings, enough for a few days if he spent carefully. After that, he refused to think further. He stood and continued walking. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered above the city. A light rain began falling. Blessing found temporary shelter beneath the awning of a small roadside cafe. Several strangers stood there waiting for the rain to pass. Among them was an elderly woman struggling to carry 2 heavy grocery bags. One bag suddenly tore open. Tomatoes rolled across the wet pavement. A bottle of cooking oil spun into the street. Before anyone else reacted, Blessing hurried forward. He picked up every tomato before passing vehicles crushed them. He retrieved the bottle from the roadside and gathered the remaining groceries into the stronger bag. "I'm so sorry," the woman said. "You don't have to apologize." "The bag was old," Blessing smiled. "So we'll carry it another way." Without hesitation, he lifted the heavier bag onto his shoulder. "Where do you live?" "It's only a few streets away." "I'll walk with you." The woman looked surprised. "You don't even know me." Blessing laughed softly. "I don't have to." The rain continued falling as they walked through narrow residential streets. The elderly woman talked about her grandchildren, her aching knees, the rising cost of food. Blessing listened patiently. When they finally reached her modest home, she reached into her purse. "Please." She held out several folded Naira notes. "You've earned this." Blessing stepped back. "I can't accept." "You helped me." "I was simply doing what anyone should do." The woman insisted again. Blessing smiled. If you really want to thank me. She waited. Cook something nice for your grandchildren. Tears filled the woman's eyes. God bless you. And you. He turned and walked away before she could offer the money again. Neither of them noticed an elegant dark blue sedan parked quietly across the street. Inside sat Chief Samuel Adeyemi. The elderly businessman had watched the entire exchange through the partially lowered window. His longtime driver glanced toward him. "Should I introduce you, sir?" Chief Samuel slowly shook his head. "Not yet." "You've been following him since this afternoon." "I know." "What do you see?" The old man continued watching Blessing disappear around the corner. "I see a man whose circumstances have changed." The driver remained silent. "But whose character has not?" The sedan quietly pulled away. Meanwhile, Blessing continued searching for affordable accommodation. Most hotels were beyond his budget. Several boarding houses were already full. As darkness settled over Lagos, he finally found a small guest house near the old market district. The owner looked skeptical when Blessing asked for a room. "One night? Yes. You'll pay first." Blessing nodded. He counted the remaining money in his wallet. After paying, very little remained. The room was tiny. A narrow bed. A small fan that rattled loudly. One window overlooking a busy alley. To Blessing, it was enough. He washed his face, changed into a clean shirt, and sat quietly on the edge of the bed. His stomach growled. Instead of buying dinner, he decided to save the money. Tomorrow would matter more. The next morning, Blessing left before sunrise. He visited several automotive workshops asking for work. Each answer was the same. "We're not hiring." He tried construction companies. Nothing. Delivery services. Nothing. Even small roadside garages had no openings. By noon, exhaustion had begun replacing hope. As he crossed a crowded intersection, he noticed a young boy frantically searching beneath parked cars. The child looked no older than 8. "What happened?" Blessing asked. The boy looked up. "My mother's medicine." "What about it?" "The money fell." Blessing immediately knelt beside him. Together they searched beneath vehicles, around drains, and between broken pavement stones. Nearly 20 minutes passed. Finally, Blessing spotted several folded notes trapped beneath a parked motorcycle. "There." The boy's face lit up. "You found it." He hugged Blessing without hesitation. "My mother needs this." "I'm glad." The boy ran toward a nearby pharmacy. Blessing smiled to himself before continuing down the sidewalk. Again, he never noticed the familiar dark blue sedan parked across the street. Chief Samuel watched quietly. This time he didn't speak. He simply observed. Most people became selfish after losing everything. Blessing seemed to become even kinder. Late that afternoon, Blessing finally found temporary work unloading heavy mechanical equipment at a warehouse. The pay was small. The work was exhausting. He accepted immediately. For 6 hours he carried crates, organized tools, and cleaned storage shelves without complaint. When the supervisor handed him his wages at sunset, Blessing smiled with genuine gratitude. It wasn't much, but it was honest. As he walked back toward the guest house, he stopped at a roadside food stall. He ordered only one simple meal. While waiting, he noticed an elderly homeless man sitting nearby, staring quietly at the steaming pot. Blessing looked at his own plate, then at the old man. Without thinking twice, he carried the meal over. "This is for you." The old man blinked in surprise. "But what about you?" Blessing smiled. "I'll manage." The old man accepted the food with trembling hands. "May heaven remember this kindness." Blessing simply nodded and continued walking. Hungry, tired, alone, yet strangely at peace. Across the street inside the dark blue sedan, Chief Samuel finally leaned back in his seat. His decision had been made. Tomorrow he would no longer watch from a distance. Tomorrow he would meet the man everyone else had been too blind to recognize. Blessing woke before dawn, long before the first buses filled the streets of Lagos. The tiny guest house room was still dark. Rain from the previous night had left the air cool, and for a brief moment he simply lay on the narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. He had no permanent job, no home, no wife, no clear idea what tomorrow would bring. Yet he whispered the same prayer he had spoken every morning since childhood. Give me the strength to do what is right even when no one is watching. After washing his face, he packed his few belongings into the worn travel bag and checked out of the guest house. The owner looked surprised. Leaving already? I found temporary work. Good. The old man hesitated before adding, You seem like a decent fellow. Blessing smiled. I try. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Food vendors arranged fresh vegetables. Taxi drivers argued over passengers. Office workers hurried toward bus stops. Life moved quickly. Blessing headed back to the warehouse where he had worked the previous afternoon. The supervisor greeted him with a short nod. You came back. I said I would. Most temporary workers don't. Blessing shrugged. A promise is a promise. The supervisor pointed toward several heavy wooden crates. Unload those first. Without complaint, Blessing got to work. For hours he lifted equipment, stacked supplies, and swept storage areas. He never stopped to complain about the heat. He never asked for easier assignments. Other workers noticed. One of them, a young man named Emeka, wiped sweat from his forehead. Brother. Blessing looked up. You work like this every day. As long as I'm able. You'll wear yourself out. Blessing smiled. Rest feels better after honest work. Emeka laughed. I wish I had your attitude. Around midday, the supervisor called everyone together. A shipment arrived with one extra payment envelope. He held up a thick brown envelope. No name. The workers exchanged confused looks. It probably belongs to accounting. Someone suggested opening it. Another worker shrugged. If nobody claims it, we should divide it. Several men nodded. Blessing remained silent. The supervisor noticed. What do you think? Blessing answered immediately. If it doesn't belong to us. He looked at the envelope. We shouldn't touch it. One worker frowned. No one would know. Blessing smiled gently. We would know. Another man laughed. You're too honest. Blessing shrugged. I'd rather lose money than lose peace. The supervisor quietly placed the envelope aside. I'll return it. Hidden behind a stack of storage containers, an elderly visitor watched everything. Chief Samuel Adeyemi lowered his sunglasses slightly. He had arranged the forgotten envelope himself. Not to tempt workers, to observe them. His longtime assistant stood beside him. That's the third time. Chief Samuel nodded. He hasn't changed. You've already seen enough. Not yet. The assistant looked puzzled. What more do you need? I need to know whether his kindness survives inconvenience. They quietly left without speaking to anyone. Later that afternoon, Blessing finished unloading the final truck. As he prepared to leave, Emeka hurried toward him. A few of us are eating nearby. Blessing smiled. Thank you. You should come. I appreciate it. You don't sound convinced. Blessing laughed softly. I only have enough money for tomorrow's breakfast. Without hesitation, Emeka reached into his pocket. I'll pay. Blessing gently pushed his hand away. No. We're friends. I know. So what's the problem? Blessing placed a hand on his shoulder. I'll gladly share a meal. Amika smiled. Good. When I can pay for my own. The younger man stared at him. You really are different. Blessing only smiled. That evening he walked toward a public bus terminal. The crowds were enormous. People rushed in every direction. While waiting to cross the street, he noticed a leather wallet lying near the curb. He picked it up. Inside were identification cards, bank cards, several $100 equivalent notes in local currency, a small photograph of a young family. The people nearby immediately noticed. One passerby whispered, "That's your lucky day." Another laughed. "Don't stand there counting it." Blessing ignored them. He searched through the wallet until he found a business card with a phone number. Using the last credit remaining on his phone, he called. A worried male voice answered instantly. "Hello? Good afternoon." "Yes. I believe I found something that belongs to you." Silence. "In my wallet?" "I think so." The man sounded overwhelmed. "Where are you?" Blessing explained his location. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, an expensive black SUV pulled up beside the bus stop. A well-dressed businessman hurried out. His face was filled with anxiety. "Are you the one who called?" Blessing held up the wallet. "Please check everything." The businessman opened it immediately. Nothing was missing. He looked stunned. "My salary," he counted quickly. "My cards." Everything remained untouched. The man looked back at Blessing in disbelief. "Do you know how much money this is?" Blessing smiled. "It isn't mine." The businessman laughed in amazement. "Young man." He reached into the wallet and removed several large bills. "Please." Blessing stepped back. "I can't. You saved me enormous trouble. I simply returned what belonged to you." The businessman insisted again. "Take it." Blessing shook his head. "If I accepted money every time I did the right thing," he smiled, "I'd start expecting rewards for honesty." The businessman stared at him, unable to speak. Finally, he folded the money back into the wallet. "I've never met anyone like you." Blessing nodded politely. "I hope you have a peaceful evening." He walked away before the businessman could stop him. Neither man noticed another familiar vehicle parked across the road. Inside the blue sedan, Chief Samuel quietly smiled. The businessman returning to his SUV was actually one of his longtime business partners. The wallet had never been accidentally lost. It had been another carefully arranged test. The assistant looked amazed. He refused again. Chief Samuel nodded slowly, without hesitation. The assistant folded his arms. Most people would have taken at least something. Exactly. They continued watching Blessing disappear into the evening crowd. As darkness settled over Lagos, Blessing returned to the small warehouse, hoping to collect the final payment for the day's work. The supervisor greeted him with an envelope. "You earned this." Blessing thanked him. Then the supervisor hesitated. "Someone left another envelope for you." Blessing frowned. "For me? I don't know who. There wasn't a name." Blessing opened it. Inside was a large amount of cash, far more than he had earned. There was no note, no explanation, no signature. He immediately looked up. "This isn't mine." The supervisor shrugged. "It was left on my desk." Blessing counted his wages separately, then placed the larger envelope back onto the desk. "If whoever left this returns," he smiled, "please give it back. And if they never come," Blessing shook his head, "then donate it." The supervisor blinked. "You're serious. It belongs to someone." What if they intended it for you? Blessing smiled. Then they'll tell me. He picked up only the small envelope containing his actual earnings. Nothing more. As he stepped outside, Chief Samuel was waiting beside the blue sedan for the very first time. The elderly man wore a simple navy suit instead of the expensive attire one might expect from a billionaire. He leaned lightly on an elegant wooden cane. His eyes were calm, wise, kind. "Young man." Blessing stopped. "Good evening, sir." Chief Samuel smiled warmly. "I believe we've been looking for each other." Blessing looked confused. "I'm sorry." The old man extended his hand. "My name is Samuel Adiemi." Blessing shook it respectfully. "I'm Blessing Okoro." Chief Samuel's smile widened. "I know exactly who you are." Blessing looked puzzled. The old man gestured toward the waiting sedan. "If you have a little time." He opened the rear door himself. "I'd like to buy you dinner." Blessing hesitated for only a moment. Something about the elderly man's eyes inspired trust. He nodded politely. "I'd be honored." Without realizing it, Blessing had just accepted the invitation that would change the direction of his entire life. Blessing hesitated for only a brief moment before stepping into the back seat of the dark blue sedan. The leather interior was spotless. Soft instrumental music played quietly through hidden speakers. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood. Everything about the car reflected quiet elegance rather than flashy wealth. Chief Samuel settled into the seat opposite him. "Are you comfortable?" Blessing nodded politely. "Yes, sir." The driver pulled smoothly into the evening traffic. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Lagos glowed outside the windows as office workers hurried home. Restaurants filled with customers and street vendors lit small lanterns beside their stalls. Finally, Chief Samuel broke the silence. "You've had a difficult week." Blessing looked surprised. "I suppose I have." "You lost your home." Blessing smiled faintly. "Yes." "You lost your marriage." The smile disappeared. "Yes." "And yet." The old man studied him carefully. "You haven't lost yourself." Blessing remained silent. Chief Samuel continued. "I've watched many people face disappointment." Blessing looked toward him. "Some become bitter." He nodded. "Some become dishonest." Another nod. "Some decide the world owes them something." Blessing smiled sadly. "I don't believe it does." Chief Samuel's eyes softened. "I know." The sedan stopped outside a quiet restaurant overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Unlike the luxurious establishments frequented by celebrities and politicians, this place was peaceful and welcoming. There were no photographers, no loud music, only warm lighting and the gentle sound of water beyond the terrace. A waiter immediately recognized Chief Samuel. "Good evening, sir." The old man smiled. "Our usual table." Blessing noticed the respect in the waiter's voice. Not fear, not flattery, respect. After they were seated, the waiter handed them menus. Blessing glanced briefly at the prices. Every meal cost more than he normally spent in several days. He quietly closed the menu. Chief Samuel noticed. "Order whatever you'd like." Blessing smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." "I'll have whatever you're having." The old man laughed. "Very well." He ordered 2 simple traditional meals and tea. When the waiter left, Chief Samuel folded his hands. "I owe you an explanation." Blessing listened. "You've probably wondered why I invited a complete stranger to dinner." "I have." Chief Samuel smiled. "We're no longer strangers." Blessing looked confused. "I've known quite a bit about you for the past 2 days." Blessing frowned slightly. "I'm afraid I don't understand." The old man leaned back comfortably. I watched you help an elderly woman carry her groceries. Blessing blinked. I saw you return a wallet containing more money than many people earn in months. Blessing remained silent. I watched you refuse money that wasn't yours. The realization slowly appeared across Blessing's face. The warehouse. Chief Samuel nodded. The forgotten payment envelope. Blessing stared at him. That was you. Yes. The wallet. Also me. Blessing was speechless. Chief Samuel smiled gently. You must think I'm an unusual old man. Blessing couldn't help smiling. I was wondering why so many strange things kept happening. The old man laughed warmly. I've spent 72 years learning one lesson. Blessing waited. Character reveals itself when nobody believes they're being tested. The food arrived. Neither man touched it immediately. Chief Samuel looked directly into Blessing's eyes. Tell me something. Yes, sir. When your wife left you, Blessing lowered his eyes. Did you hate her? A long silence followed. Finally, Blessing answered. No. Chief Samuel looked surprised. You don't... Blessing slowly shook his head. I was hurt. I can imagine. I was disappointed. Another nod. But hate... He sighed softly. Hate would only keep me tied to yesterday. The old man smiled. And her family. Blessing thought carefully. I don't hate them either. They humiliated you. They did. They mocked your work. Yes. They convinced your wife to abandon you. Blessing nodded quietly. They did. Chief Samuel leaned forward. So why forgive them? Blessing looked through the restaurant window toward the dark water. My father used to tell me something. What was that? If someone throws mud at you, he smiled gently. Don't pick it up. The old man listened carefully. Because once you do, Blessing looked back at him. Your own hands become dirty too. Chief Samuel remained silent for several moments. Then he quietly asked, What do you want now? Blessing answered without hesitation. A chance. The old man tilted his head. A chance to become rich. Blessing smiled. No. A chance to work. Another pause. A chance to prove that losing everything doesn't mean becoming nothing. Chief Samuel slowly nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. The old man reached into a leather briefcase beside his chair. He removed a thin blue folder and placed it on the table. Blessing looked down at it. Across the front were the words, Adiemi Engineering Group. He looked back at Chief Samuel. I've heard of this company. I imagine you have. It's one of the largest engineering firms in Nigeria. Chief Samuel nodded. My father started it 60 years ago. Blessing looked at him in surprise. You own it. I do. For a brief moment, Blessing said nothing. The old man continued. Thousands of people work for us. Blessing glanced back at the folder. We build bridges. He nodded. Factories. Another nod. Power systems. Blessing listened carefully. Chief Samuel smiled, but lately, his expression became thoughtful. I've been searching for something far more difficult to find. Blessing waited. A trustworthy person. The words hung quietly between them. Chief Samuel pushed the folder toward him. I'd like you to work for me. Blessing blinked. Sir, the old man raised one hand. Not because I pity you. Blessing listened. Not because your wife left you. Another pause. And certainly not because I enjoy rescuing strangers. A small smile appeared on Blessing's face. I was beginning to wonder. Chief Samuel chuckled. I'm offering you an opportunity because you've already demonstrated something my company desperately needs. Blessing looked confused. What is that? Integrity. The old man's voice became firm. I can teach technical systems. He tapped the folder. I can teach management. Another tap. I can teach finance. Then he gently pointed toward Blessing. But I cannot teach a man to become honest. Blessing felt emotion rising inside him. I don't know what to say. Say yes if you're willing to work. Blessing hesitated. I should tell you something. Chief Samuel nodded. I've never worked in an office. I know. I've never managed a large company. I know. I don't have a university degree. I know. Blessing looked genuinely worried. What if I disappoint you? The old man smiled. You'll begin as a trainee in our operations division. Blessing relaxed slightly. You'll learn. I will. You'll make mistakes. I'm sure I will. You'll also discover abilities you never knew you possessed. Blessing looked down at the folder once more. This feels impossible. Chief Samuel leaned back. No. He smiled warmly. It feels earned. Blessing slowly opened the folder. Inside was an employment agreement, training schedule, identification forms, accommodation details. Everything had already been prepared. He looked up in amazement. You expected me to accept? Chief Samuel laughed. I hoped. Blessing closed the folder carefully. Then he stood. The old man looked up. Instead of speaking immediately, Blessing bowed his head slightly. Thank you. Chief Samuel smiled. For what? For seeing something in me. Blessing's voice became quieter. When everyone else only saw what I lacked. The old man stood as well. He extended his hand once again. Welcome to Adiemi Engineering Group, Blessing Okoro. Blessing shook it firmly. At that exact moment, neither man realized that only 7 days after walking away from the Okafor mansion, with nothing but a worn travel bag, Blessing's life had already begun changing in ways no one, not even Amara, could have imagined. Blessing arrived in the headquarters of Adeyemi Engineering Group before 7 o'clock on Monday morning. The company occupied a modern glass building overlooking one of Lagos's busiest business districts. Employees in crisp suits walked confidently through the revolving doors, carrying laptops and cups of coffee as security guards greeted them by name. Blessing stopped on the opposite side of the street. He looked down at his reflection in the polished glass of the entrance. Chief Samuel had insisted that he accept a few new sets of professional clothing as part of the company's onboarding package. Blessing now wore a simple navy blue suit, a white shirt, polished black shoes, and a modest wristwatch. The clothes fit perfectly, yet somehow he still felt like the same mechanic who had spent years repairing engines beneath leaking garage roofs. He took a slow breath, then crossed the street. Inside the reception area, everything moved with quiet efficiency. Employees checked in electronically. Visitors signed digital registers. Large screens displayed engineering projects from across Nigeria. Blessing couldn't help looking around with genuine curiosity. A cheerful receptionist smiled. Good morning. Good morning. You must be Mr. Blessing Okoro. He blinked. Yes. We've been expecting you. She handed him a visitor badge. Someone will escort you upstairs. Blessing thanked her politely and waited near the reception desk. Several employees walked past. Some smiled. Others glanced curiously at the unfamiliar face. Within minutes, a middle-aged woman approached. I'm Esther Balogun. She extended her hand confidently. I oversee operations training. Blessing shook her hand respectfully. It's a pleasure to meet you. Chief Samuel speaks very highly of you. Blessing smiled awkwardly. I hope I can live up to his expectations. Esther studied him for a moment. You'll soon discover something. Blessing waited. He doesn't compliment people easily. They entered the elevator together. As it rose toward the executive training floor, Esther explained the company's structure. There are no shortcuts here. Blessing nodded. Everyone earns their position. I understand. You'll spend several weeks rotating through different departments. That sounds fair. You'll learn logistics. Another nod. Procurement. Yes. Project coordination. Blessing listened carefully. And finally, leadership. He smiled. I have a great deal to learn. Esther laughed softly. That's probably why Chief Samuel chose you. The first few hours passed quickly. Blessing met warehouse managers, engineers, accountants, and project supervisors. Instead of pretending to understand unfamiliar systems, he asked thoughtful questions. Instead of trying to impress anyone, he quietly took notes. Whenever someone explained a procedure, he listened without interrupting. Several employees noticed. At lunchtime, a young project coordinator named Chica joined him in the cafeteria. You don't seem nervous, Blessing smiled. Oh, I'm nervous. You hide it well. I've learned something. What's that? People usually learn more by listening than talking. Chica laughed. I should remember that. Across the room, two senior employees watched the conversation. One quietly whispered, That's the mechanic Chief Samuel hired. The other frowned. A mechanic. So I heard. Interesting choice. Blessing never heard them. That afternoon, Esther assigned him to observe warehouse operations. The company managed millions of dollars worth of equipment every month. Every shipment required precise documentation. Every delivery followed strict procedures. As Blessing walked through the enormous storage facility, he noticed something unusual. One inventory report listed 12 industrial generators. He counted only 11. He checked again. Still 11. Rather than assuming someone else would notice, he approached the warehouse supervisor. Excuse me. The supervisor looked up. Yes. I think there may be an error. The man frowned. What kind of error? Blessing explained calmly. The supervisor immediately reviewed the records. 10 minutes later, an internal investigation began. An accounting mistake had almost resulted in a costly shipment delay. The supervisor looked genuinely impressed. Most trainees wouldn't have paid attention. Blessing shrugged. I spent years counting spare parts. The man smiled. Good habit. Before leaving that evening, the supervisor sent a short report to Esther. She forwarded it directly to Chief Samuel. The old businessman read it carefully before smiling to himself. He had expected honesty. He hadn't expected such careful observation. Meanwhile, across Lagos, life inside the Okafor mansion had begun changing in quieter ways. Amara sat alone in the spacious living room staring at her untouched cup of tea. It had been exactly 1 week since Blessing left. The house remained beautiful. Marble floors, expensive artwork, fresh flowers. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow it felt strangely empty. Grace entered carrying shopping bags. You're still sitting here. Amara nodded. I wasn't feeling hungry. You've barely eaten all week. I'm fine. Grace sighed. You'll recover. Amara didn't answer. Her mother sat beside her. I know this hasn't been easy. No, but it was necessary. Silence. Grace continued gently. You deserve someone who can provide. Amara stared through the large windows into the garden. Blessing always provided. Grace frowned. With what? Amara answered quietly. He never let me feel alone. Her mother looked uncomfortable. Companionship isn't enough. Amara lowered her eyes. Maybe. That evening, Kelvin returned home after another unsuccessful meeting with investors. He threw his briefcase onto a sofa. Unbelievable. Chief Edwin looked up from his newspaper. What happened? The bank rejected the expansion loan. Again, Kelvin nodded angrily. They said current market conditions are too risky. Chief Edwin's expression darkened. We'll find another solution. Kelvin sighed. I hope so. For the first time in years, uncertainty entered the Okafor household. Amara quietly watched the conversation. She remembered something Blessing often said whenever money became tight. We'll solve one problem at a time. Back then, she had considered those words too simple. Now, they sounded strangely comforting. Later that night, she walked into the guest bedroom where Blessing used to keep his toolbox. The room had already been cleaned. The shelves were empty. Only one forgotten item remained. A small notebook. She picked it up. Inside were handwritten lists, monthly expenses, savings goals. Between the pages, she found something unexpected. A folded receipt. It was from a property agency. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The document showed a savings account dedicated to a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. The account holder's name was Blessing Okoro. Every month, small deposits had been added. The balance wasn't large, but it represented years of sacrifice. Attached to the receipt was a handwritten note. Hopefully enough by December. I can't wait to surprise Amara with a better home. She read the sentence again, and again. Tears slowly filled her eyes. She had believed Blessing wasn't trying. She had been completely wrong. At that same moment, Blessing sat alone in his new company apartment provided by Adeyemi Engineering Group. It wasn't luxurious, just clean, comfortable, peaceful. He unpacked his small travel bag. Everything he owned fit easily into one closet. He looked around the quiet room. For the first time in many days, he allowed himself a small smile. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, but he finally had something he had almost lost forever: hope. Neither Blessing nor Amara knew that their lives were moving in opposite directions. One was discovering opportunities born from integrity. The other was beginning to uncover painful truths hidden beneath regret, and neither of them realized that fate was already preparing the moment when their paths would cross again. 3 weeks passed. Blessing threw himself into every assignment at Adeyemi Engineering Group with the same determination he had once brought to repairing broken engines in a small neighborhood garage. He arrived before everyone else. He left only after finishing every task on his desk. Whenever he encountered something he didn't understand, he stayed late to learn instead of pretending to know. Esther Balogun watched his progress carefully. One Friday afternoon, she invited him into her office. "Sit down, Blessing." He thanked her and took a seat. She placed a performance file on her desk. "I've reviewed reports from every department you've worked in." Blessing listened quietly. "The warehouse manager praised your attention to detail." He nodded. "The logistics team appreciated your willingness to help." Another nod. "The accounting department said you asked thoughtful questions." Blessing smiled modestly. "I'm still learning." Esther leaned back. "Exactly." She paused. "Do you know what none of those reports mentioned?" Blessing looked puzzled. "No. They never mentioned your past." He frowned slightly. "I don't understand. No one talked about you being a mechanic." Blessing remained silent. "They talked about your work today." Those words stayed with him long after he left her office. For the first time in many years, people were judging him by his actions instead of his background. That evening, Chief Samuel requested a private meeting. Blessing entered the spacious executive office feeling slightly nervous. The room overlooked much of Lagos. Books lined one wall. Engineering blueprints covered another. Chief Samuel motioned toward a chair. "Relax." Blessing smiled. "I'm trying." The old man laughed. "I've noticed." He poured 2 cups of tea before continuing. "Tell me." "Yes, sir." "What have you learned during these past weeks?" Blessing thought carefully. "I've learned that large companies succeed because ordinary people perform small responsibilities faithfully." Chief Samuel smiled. "Interesting. I've also learned that leadership isn't about giving orders." The old man nodded. "What is it about helping people succeed?" Chief Samuel's smile widened. "You've been paying attention." Blessing hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really choose me?" The old businessman looked out the window for several moments. "When I was 28, he spoke quietly. "My father gave me my first management position." Blessing listened. "I thought intelligence was enough." The old man smiled sadly. "I was wrong." "What happened?" "I hired clever people." He paused. "They stole." "I hired experienced people." Another pause. "They lied." "I hired talented people." And they cared only about themselves. Chief Samuel looked directly at Blessing. "Eventually I discovered something." Blessing waited. "Integrity creates better decisions than brilliance without character." The room became quiet. "I've spent 20 years looking for people I don't have to watch." Blessing lowered his eyes. "I hope I become one of them." Chief Samuel answered immediately. "You already are." The following Monday, Blessing received his first independent assignment. A regional supplier had mistakenly delivered expensive electrical equipment to the wrong warehouse. The error threatened to delay an important infrastructure project. Esther handed him the file. "I want you to coordinate the correction." Blessing looked surprised. "Alone? You'll have support?" She smiled. "But the responsibility is yours." He accepted without hesitation. Over the next 2 days, Blessing visited warehouses, reviewed transport schedules, and personally spoke with delivery supervisors. Instead of blaming anyone, he focused entirely on solving the problem. When one exhausted truck driver apologized repeatedly for the mistake, Blessing simply smiled. "We're fixing it together." The driver looked relieved. "Thank you." By Wednesday afternoon, every shipment had reached its proper destination. The project continued without delay. Senior management took notice. One executive commented during a meeting, "The new trainee handled that situation better than some experienced managers." Chief Samuel said nothing, but inwardly he smiled. Meanwhile, across the city, trouble had begun surrounding the Okafor family. Chief Edwin sat silently inside his office, reading financial reports. His face grew more serious with every page. Grace entered carrying coffee. "You've been in here since morning." He didn't answer. She placed the cup on his desk. "What's wrong?" Chief Edwin removed his glasses. "Our construction investment has failed." Grace frowned. "I thought the project was guaranteed." "So did everyone else." He rubbed his forehead. "The developers underestimated costs." "How bad is it?" He remained silent. She looked at the reports. Her expression immediately changed. "This can't be right." "I'm afraid it is." Millions had been tied up in the project. Now suppliers demanded payment. Banks refused additional credit. Several investors had already withdrawn. Kelvin entered without knocking. "I just spoke with another lender." Chief Edwin looked up. "And they refused." Silence filled the office. Kelvin slammed the folder onto the desk. "They all say the same thing." "What?" They don't believe we can recover without outside backing. Grace slowly sat down. What are we going to do? Chief Edwin looked toward the window. There may be one possibility. Kelvin folded his arms. Which is Adiemi Engineering Group. Kelvin frowned. Their financial position is still strong. Chief Edwin nodded. They've partnered with struggling firms before. Grace looked hopeful. Then contact them. I already have. When? This morning. Kelvin leaned forward. What did they say? They're willing to discuss a partnership. Hope returned briefly to the room. That's wonderful. Chief Edwin raised one hand. There is one condition. The room became quiet again. They've assigned a new operations executive to evaluate potential partnerships. Kelvin shrugged. So, if that executive doesn't recommend us... He closed the file. The deal ends immediately. Grace looked worried. Who is this executive? I don't know. Kelvin laughed confidently. Whoever it is will convince them. Chief Edwin wasn't so certain. They've earned a reputation for choosing people based on principle rather than influence. Kelvin smiled. Everyone has a price. His father looked at him sharply. Not everyone. Elsewhere in the mansion, Amara quietly overheard part of the conversation from the hallway. She wasn't interested in business. Not anymore. Her thoughts remained elsewhere. Every evening she found herself remembering small moments she had ignored while they were happening. Blessing repairing the kitchen sink instead of paying someone else. Blessing leaving encouraging notes inside her lunch bag. Blessing pretending not to notice when she secretly cried after difficult days. She had once viewed those gestures as ordinary. Now they seemed priceless. She entered her bedroom and opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside lay the simple silver wedding ring Blessing had placed in her hand the day he left. She picked it up carefully. Running her thumb across its smooth surface, she whispered softly, "I'm sorry." No one heard her. Across town, Blessing remained completely unaware of the struggles unfolding inside the Okoro mansion. He was finishing another successful day when Esther approached his desk. The executive committee reviewed your latest project. Blessing stood. I hope everything was satisfactory. She smiled. Better than satisfactory. She handed him a sealed envelope. Chief Samuel wants you in the boardroom tomorrow morning. Blessing looked confused. Is something wrong? Esther laughed. If I were you, she paused, I'd wear your best suit. Blessing watched her walk away. He looked down at the envelope in his hands. Whatever awaited him tomorrow, he sensed another chapter of his life was about to begin. Far across Lagos, the Okafor family also prepared for an important meeting. None of them imagined that destiny was quietly leading both paths toward the very same boardroom. Blessing barely slept that night. The sealed envelope from Esther remained on the small desk inside his company apartment long after midnight. He had opened it several times, hoping more words would somehow appear. The message remained the same. Executive Board Meeting, 9:00 a.m. Attendance required, business formal. Nothing more, no explanation, no agenda. He wondered whether he had made a mistake during the warehouse assignment. Perhaps someone had complained. Perhaps Chief Samuel had discovered he wasn't ready for such responsibility after all. Before allowing worry to grow further, Blessing reminded himself of something his father often said. Fear usually tells stories before truth has the chance. With that thought, he finally drifted to sleep. The next morning, he arrived at headquarters nearly an hour early. The receptionist greeted him warmly. Good morning, Mr. Okoro. He smiled. Good morning. I believe they're expecting you upstairs. Thank you. As the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, Blessing noticed his reflection once again in the polished steel doors. Only a month earlier, he had entered the building as an uncertain trainee. Today, he carried himself differently. Not with pride, with quiet confidence. The elevator doors opened. Esther Balogun stood waiting. "You came early." "I didn't want to be late. I expected that." She handed him a folder. "Review these while we walk." Inside were documents describing a medium-sized manufacturing company seeking a strategic partnership. Financial statements, operational summaries, equipment evaluations. Everything appeared organized. Blessing frowned slightly. "This company seems familiar." Esther glanced toward him. "The name?" He nodded. "Okafor Industrial Holdings." She watched his expression carefully. "Do you know them?" Blessing paused for only a second. "Personally." She didn't ask another question. Instead, they continued walking toward the executive conference room. Inside, several senior executives were already seated around a long, polished table. Blessing greeted each person respectfully. Some returned warm smiles. Others simply nodded. Chief Samuel entered last. The room immediately became quiet. He looked around the table before speaking. "Good morning." Everyone answered together. "Good morning, sir." The old businessman remained standing. "Before discussing today's agenda, I have an announcement." He looked toward Blessing. "Mr. Okoro." Blessing stood immediately. Chief Samuel smiled. "Over the past month, you've completed every training assignment ahead of schedule." Blessing remained silent. "You've demonstrated sound judgment." Another pause. "Professional integrity." "And leadership." Several executives nodded in agreement. Chief Samuel continued. "For those reasons effective immediately." The room became still. "You are being appointed Operations Development Executive." Blessing blinked in disbelief. A few executives smiled. Others applauded politely. He looked toward Esther, unsure whether he had heard correctly. She simply smiled. Chief Samuel motioned for him to remain standing. "This position carries significant responsibility." Blessing found his voice. "Sir." The old man raised one hand. "I haven't finished." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room. "You'll report directly to executive management." Blessing swallowed hard. "You'll oversee operational evaluations." He nodded slowly. "And you'll represent ADME Engineering during strategic partnership negotiations." The room erupted into applause. Blessing stood frozen. Only weeks earlier, he had been sleeping in a tiny guest house after losing everything. Now he was being trusted with decisions affecting multi-million-dollar projects. When the applause faded, he finally spoke. "I don't know if I deserve this." Chief Samuel answered calmly. "You've already earned it." Blessing lowered his head respectfully. "I won't disappoint you." "I know." The meeting then shifted toward business. Chief Samuel opened the project file. "Our first evaluation concerns Okafor Industrial Holdings." Blessing's heart skipped. He kept his face calm. Another executive summarized the situation. The company experienced severe losses following an unsuccessful infrastructure investment. Charts appeared on the presentation screen. Outstanding debts, delayed contracts, cash flow problems. Blessing listened professionally. Everything being discussed concerned Amara's family. Yet he forced himself to evaluate the information objectively. One executive shook his head. "The financial outlook isn't encouraging." Another disagreed. "They still possess valuable manufacturing assets." A third added, "They require strong operational restructuring." Chief Samuel turned toward Blessing. "What is your assessment?" Every eye in the room shifted toward him. Blessing carefully reviewed the documents one final time. Then he answered, The company still has potential. Several executives nodded. But, he continued, potential without accountability creates future risk. Chief Samuel watched quietly. I recommend a full operational review before any investment decision. The old man smiled. And who should conduct that review? Blessing hesitated. Chief Samuel answered his own question. You. The room remained silent. Blessing slowly nodded. I understand. Chief Samuel closed the folder. Very well. The meeting with Okafor Industrial Holdings has been scheduled. When? Tomorrow morning. Blessing's breathing slowed. Tomorrow. He would face the family who had rejected him. Not as a husband, not as a mechanic. As the executive representing one of Nigeria's most respected engineering firms. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As executives left the room, Esther remained behind. She approached Blessing quietly. You handled yourself well. He smiled faintly. I wasn't expecting any of this. I know. She studied him carefully. Are you all right? Blessing looked through the conference room windows overlooking Lagos. I'm thinking. About your former family. He nodded. I never imagined I'd see them again this soon. Esther spoke gently. You don't have to attend if it's too personal. Blessing looked at her. No. He shook his head. This isn't personal. She raised an eyebrow. No. He smiled quietly. It became business the day they decided my worth could be measured by money. She saw no bitterness in his expression, only peace. Meanwhile, inside the Okafor mansion, preparations for the meeting were underway. Chief Edwin stood before a mirror adjusting his expensive charcoal gray suit. Grace entered, carrying several folders. The financial projections. He accepted them. Thank you. Kelvin walked into the room confidently. I've reviewed the company's recent acquisitions. Chief Edwin nodded. Good. I also researched their executive leadership. What did you find? Chief Samuel rarely attends negotiations personally anymore. Grace smiled. Then we'll probably meet one of his senior directors. Kelvin laughed. Executives usually enjoy being treated well. He straightened his tie. We'll impress them. Chief Edwin remained thoughtful. Don't become overconfident. We're offering valuable assets. His father looked at him seriously. We're asking for help. Kelvin shrugged. It's still business. Amara quietly entered, carrying another folder. Her father looked surprised. I didn't ask you to come. I know. She hesitated. I'd like to attend. Kelvin frowned. Why? She answered honestly. I helped organize some of the company records. Chief Edwin studied her face. In truth, he suspected another reason. Since Blessing had left, his daughter had changed. She spoke less, smiled less, spent long hours alone. The confidence she once displayed had quietly disappeared. After several moments, he nodded. Very well. Grace looked uncertain. Are you sure? Chief Edwin answered calmly. It may be useful. Amara thanked him softly. That evening, she stood once again beside her bedroom window. The silver wedding ring rested in her hand. She whispered into the quiet room. I hope you're doing all right. Far across Lagos, Blessing stood on the balcony of his company apartment, looking toward the distant city lights. Tomorrow he would see Amara again. He wondered how she was, whether she was happy, whether she had found the life she believed she wanted. He quietly placed those thoughts aside. Tomorrow he would not walk into that meeting as the man who had once begged for acceptance. He would walk in representing responsibility, professionalism, and integrity. The past would be sitting across the table, but it would no longer define the man entering the room. Blessing arrived at ADME Engineering Group nearly 45 minutes before the scheduled meeting. The boardroom on the 20th floor overlooked the Lagos skyline, where the morning sun reflected off glass towers and busy highways below. Inside, everything had already been prepared. Bottled water stood beside neatly arranged folders. A large digital screen displayed the agenda for the day's negotiation. Blessing placed his notebook on the table and quietly reviewed the financial reports one final time. He had spent most of the previous evening studying every page: outstanding liabilities, projected revenue, manufacturing capacity, employee retention. He forced himself to think only like an executive, not like the husband who had once sat at the Okoro family's dining table. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. Chief Samuel entered. "Good morning." Blessing immediately stood. "Good morning, sir." The older man smiled. "Nervous?" Blessing considered the question honestly. "A little." "I expected that." Chief Samuel walked toward the large window overlooking the city. "I want you to remember something." Blessing listened carefully. "This meeting is not about revenge. It isn't. It isn't about proving anyone wrong." Blessing nodded. "I know. It's about determining whether this partnership benefits our company." Blessing answered firmly. "That will be my only focus." Chief Samuel turned toward him with an approving smile. "Good." He placed one hand gently on Blessing's shoulder. "I trusted your character before I trusted your ability." Blessing smiled. "I won't forget." At precisely 9 o'clock, the receptionist called through the intercom. "Our guests have arrived." Chief Samuel glanced toward Blessing. "Ready?" Blessing took one slow breath. "Yes." Outside the boardroom, the Okoro family followed a company assistant through the executive corridor. Chief Edwin walked confidently despite the pressure weighing on his shoulders. Grace carried several financial documents. Kelvin adjusted his expensive tie while quietly rehearsing key negotiation points. Amara walked silently behind them. Her eyes wandered across framed photographs lining the hallway. Engineering projects, scholarship programs, community development initiatives. The company seemed very different from what she had imagined. Professional, quiet, purpose-driven. The assistant stopped before large wooden doors. "The executive committee is ready." Chief Edwin nodded. "Thank you." The doors slowly opened. The family stepped inside. Chief Edwin immediately focused on the people seated around the conference table. Several senior executives, department directors, legal advisors. Then his eyes moved toward the far end of the room. He froze. Grace stopped walking. Kelvin's confident expression vanished. Amara forgot to breathe. Standing beside Chief Samuel, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, holding a leather portfolio, was Blessing. For several endless seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence became almost unbearable. Blessing looked at each familiar face calmly. His expression remained professional. There was no anger, no satisfaction, no bitterness, only quiet composure. Chief Samuel finally broke the silence. "Good morning." His voice echoed gently through the room. "Please have a seat." The Okoro family slowly obeyed. Kelvin sat down mechanically, unable to take his eyes off Blessing. Grace looked completely bewildered. Amara stared at Blessing as though seeing him for the first time. He looked different, not because of the suit, not because of the polished shoes. There was a confidence in his posture she had never noticed before, a quiet strength. Chief Samuel began the introductions. "For anyone we haven't met," he gestured toward Blessing, "this is Mr. Blessing Okoro." Another long silence. "Our newly appointed Operations Development Executive." Chief Edwin's face lost all color. Kelvin blinked repeatedly. Impossible. The mechanic. The man they had ridiculed only weeks earlier, Chief Samuel continued naturally. Mr. Okoro has been assigned to lead our operational evaluation of today's proposal. Chief Edwin finally found his voice. He cleared his throat. I wasn't aware. Chief Samuel smiled politely. Our personnel decisions are internal matters. Chief Edwin nodded awkwardly. Of course. Blessing opened his notebook. Shall we begin? His voice remained calm, professional, respectful. Exactly the same tone he had used with warehouse workers, engineers, and receptionists. There wasn't even the slightest hint of resentment. That somehow made everything even harder. Chief Edwin presented the company's proposal. He explained the financial challenges, future opportunities, recovery plans. Blessing listened attentively, occasionally writing short notes. He never interrupted. When the presentation ended, Chief Samuel looked toward him. Mr. Okoro. Blessing nodded. Thank you. He slowly closed the financial folder before speaking. First, I'd like to acknowledge the strengths of Okafor Industrial Holdings. Chief Edwin looked surprised. The company possesses experienced technical staff. Blessing continued. A respected manufacturing history. Another pause. And valuable production facilities. Kelvin glanced toward his father. Perhaps this meeting would go better than expected. Then Blessing continued. However, the room grew quiet again. Our review also identified several concerns. He calmly displayed a series of charts on the large screen. Cash flow weaknesses, delayed supplier payments, inventory management problems, operational inefficiencies. Every point was supported by evidence. Every observation was objective. Nobody could dispute the facts. Grace slowly lowered her eyes. Chief Edwin listened without interruption. He realized something immediately. Blessing had prepared thoroughly, far more thoroughly than they had expected. After several minutes, Blessing concluded his analysis. In my opinion, he paused. Oh, the company's difficulties are serious. Kelvin immediately leaned forward. But recoverable, Blessing looked directly at him. Yes. Hope returned to Kelvin's face, but only under strict operational restructuring. Chief Edwin nodded slowly. What kind of restructuring? Blessing explained carefully. Transparent financial oversight, independent auditing, supply chain modernization, executive accountability. Every recommendation was practical, reasonable, professional. Not once did he mention the past. Not once did he remind them how they had treated him. That silence became heavier than any accusation. After nearly an hour of discussion, Chief Samuel finally asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Mr. Okoro, Blessing looked toward him. Based on everything you've reviewed, the old man folded his hands. Would you recommend that Adiemi Engineering continue negotiations? The room became perfectly still. Chief Edwin unconsciously held his breath. Grace clasped her hands tightly beneath the table. Kelvin stared directly at Blessing. Amara couldn't even look up. Blessing remained silent for several moments, not because he enjoyed the suspense, because he wanted to answer responsibly. Finally, he spoke. I would. The tension in the room eased instantly. Chief Edwin quietly exhaled. Grace closed her eyes briefly in relief. Kelvin smiled for the first time all morning. Blessing continued. I recommend continuing negotiations. Another pause. Provided every restructuring condition is fully accepted. Chief Edwin answered immediately. We're willing to cooperate. Blessing nodded. Good. Chief Samuel smiled with quiet satisfaction. I believe that's an excellent place to continue. The meeting concluded shortly afterward. Executives began collecting documents. Lawyers discussed scheduling follow-up sessions. People slowly filed toward the door. The Okafor family remained seated, almost as if none of them knew how to leave. Blessing gathered his notebook calmly. As he turned toward the exit, a quiet voice stopped him. "Blessing." He recognized it instantly. "Amara." He paused, slowly turned around. For the first time since the meeting began, their eyes truly met. She stood alone. The others had already stepped into the hallway. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Her voice trembled. "Glad you're doing well." Blessing looked at her quietly. Then he offered the same gentle smile she had once fallen in love with. "Thank you, Amara." Nothing more. No accusations, no questions, no anger. Just gratitude. Then he nodded politely and walked out of the boardroom, leaving Amara standing alone with the painful realization that the man she had once believed wasn't enough had become someone she could no longer reach. The conference room slowly emptied. Lawyers carried thick folders into the hallway. Senior executives discussed timelines for the next stage of negotiations. Administrative assistants gathered presentation materials and switched off the large display screens. Within minutes, only the Okafor family remained inside. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Chief Edwin finally rose from his chair and looked toward the closed door through which Blessing had disappeared. "I never expected this." Kelvin let out a long breath. "Neither did I." Grace lowered her eyes. How could everything change so quickly? No one had an answer. Amara quietly picked up her notebook, though she had written almost nothing during the meeting. Every page remained nearly blank. Her thoughts had never left Blessing. Not the executive who had presented charts and financial reports. The man who had smiled at her without anger. That gentle smile hurt far more than if he had shouted. Chief Edwin straightened his jacket. "We should leave." The family silently followed him toward the elevator. As the doors closed, Kelvin finally spoke. "I still don't understand." His father looked at him. "Understand what?" "How he ended up there." Grace sighed. "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter." Kelvin folded his arms. "Someone like Blessing doesn't become an executive in a few weeks." Chief Edwin answered quietly, "No. He doesn't. He becomes one because someone recognized qualities we ignored." Those words remained with everyone during the drive home. No music played inside the luxury SUV. No conversation followed. Each family member sat alone with private thoughts. Back at Adiemi Engineering Group, Blessing returned to his office. He closed the door gently and sat behind his desk. Only then did he allow himself a long, slow breath. Seeing Amara again had awakened memories he believed were already fading. Their small apartment, Sunday church services, evening walks through quiet neighborhoods, simple meals shared after long workdays. Not every memory had been painful. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Chief Samuel entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might need this." Blessing smiled gratefully. "Thank you." The older man handed him 1 cup before sitting opposite him. "You handled yourself well today." Blessing nodded. "I tried." "You did more than try." Chief Samuel studied him carefully. "Were you tempted?" Blessing looked puzzled. "Tempted?" "To embarrass them." Blessing immediately shook his head. "No." "To remind them how they treated you." "No." "To make them feel small." Blessing smiled faintly. "They already felt uncomfortable." The old man nodded. "They did. I didn't need to add anything." Chief Samuel leaned back. "That's exactly why I trusted you with today's meeting." Blessing looked down at his tea. "I'll admit something." What is it? I was afraid before they arrived. Chief Samuel smiled. I know. I worried old emotions might affect my judgment. And did they? Blessing thought for a moment. I remembered the pain. He paused. But I also remembered something else. What? My father used to tell me that fairness becomes most valuable when it's difficult. The old man smiled warmly. You honored him today. Blessing quietly nodded. I hope so. Chief Samuel stood. There's another reason I came. Blessing looked up. The executive committee approved your recommendation. Blessing listened. We'll begin restructuring negotiations next week. I'm glad. You'll continue leading the operational team. Blessing accepted the responsibility calmly. I'll do my best. I know you will. Before leaving, Chief Samuel stopped at the door. One more thing. Yes, sir. The strongest victory is the one that doesn't require humiliating anyone. After the door closed, Blessing sat quietly for several minutes. Those words stayed with him for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, at the Okafor mansion, dinner was unusually quiet. The long dining table, normally filled with conversation about investments and business opportunities, felt strangely uncomfortable. Chief Edwin slowly put down his fork. I owe everyone an apology. Grace looked surprised. For what? I judged a man's future by his income. Kelvin shifted uneasily. We all did. Chief Edwin nodded. That doesn't make it right. Grace stared at her untouched plate. I thought I was protecting Amara. Amara finally spoke. You were. Her mother looked up. I believed money would guarantee happiness. She paused. I believed you would eventually thank me. Amara forced a weak smile. I wanted to believe that too. The room fell silent again. After dinner, Chief Edwin asked Amara to remain behind. When the others left, he looked at his daughter carefully. Tell me honestly. She met his eyes. Yes. Do you still love him? The question caught her completely by surprise. She looked away. Tears slowly formed again. I don't know if I deserve to answer that. Her father waited patiently. I stopped appreciating him long before he left. She swallowed hard. I kept comparing him to people with more money. Another pause. I forgot to compare him to people with more character. Chief Edwin closed his eyes briefly. I helped create that mistake. Amara shook her head. No. I made my own choices. She reached into her handbag and removed the simple silver wedding ring. Her father stared at it. I've carried it every day. She whispered. I couldn't bring myself to put it away. Chief Edwin sighed deeply. I don't know whether he'll ever forgive us. Amara answered quietly. I'm not sure he should. Elsewhere in Lagos, Kelvin sat alone in his private office. He replayed the morning meeting repeatedly. The calm confidence, the careful analysis, the professionalism. It made no sense. He had always believed successful people were naturally superior. Yet today, the most respected person in the room had been the man he once mocked for repairing engines. For the first time in years, Kelvin questioned one of his own beliefs. Perhaps success wasn't measured only by wealth. Perhaps character really did matter. The realization unsettled him. The following morning, Blessing arrived at work expecting another ordinary day. Instead, Esther greeted him outside his office with a smile. You have visitors. Blessing looked surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. They don't have appointments. Who are they? Esther smiled knowingly. I think you'll recognize them. Blessing followed her toward the reception area. As they rounded the corner, he stopped. Standing quietly near the reception desk were Chief Edwin, Grace, Kelvin, and Amara. None of them had come for business. For the first time since the divorce, they had come for only one reason: to speak with Blessing, not as the poor mechanic they had once rejected, but as the man whose dignity they had finally learned to respect. Blessing stood motionless for several seconds. Across the reception area, the Okafor family waited quietly. The confident expressions they had once carried were gone. Chief Edwin stood with both hands resting on the handle of his cane, his shoulders noticeably lower than before. Grace held a small envelope tightly against her chest. Kelvin avoided looking directly at Blessing. Amara simply stood there, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Employees walking through the lobby sensed the unusual atmosphere. They politely continued on their way, careful not to interrupt. Esther glanced at Blessing. "I can ask security to escort them to a meeting room." Blessing shook his head gently. "Thank you. I'll speak with them." Esther nodded and quietly walked away. Blessing approached slowly. "Good morning." Chief Edwin immediately answered. "Good morning, Blessing." The greeting sounded almost unfamiliar. Respectful. Careful. Blessing smiled politely. "What can I do for you?" Chief Edwin took a slow breath. "We're not here about the partnership." Blessing nodded. "I understand. We came because there are things that should have been said a long time ago." Blessing looked toward the nearby reception lounge. "Please. We can sit over there." A few moments later, they were seated around a small table overlooking the city. For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Chief Edwin broke the silence. "I've spent my entire life believing success gave me the right to judge people." He lowered his eyes. "Yesterday showed me how wrong I was." Blessing listened quietly. "I measured you by your bank account." The older man's voice grew softer. "I never measured your heart." Grace wiped away a tear. "I encouraged Amara to leave you." She struggled to continue. "I convinced myself I was protecting my daughter." Her hands trembled slightly. "Yeah. I never stopped to ask whether I was destroying her happiness." Blessing remained silent. There was nothing to interrupt, nothing to argue against. Kelvin finally spoke. "I owe you an apology, too." Blessing looked at him. "I mocked your work." Kelvin forced himself to continue, despite the embarrassment. "I treated you as though earning an honest living was something to be ashamed of." He looked directly into Blessing's eyes. "I was arrogant. I was cruel. And I was wrong." Blessing nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." Kelvin seemed surprised. "That's all." Blessing smiled gently. "What else should I say?" Kelvin looked down. "I don't know." A long silence followed. Then Amara quietly reached into her handbag. She placed the simple silver wedding ring on the table between them. Blessing stared at it for several moments. "I've carried this every day." Her voice trembled. "I couldn't throw it away." Blessing looked at her calmly. "I see. I wanted to." She shook her head. "But every time I tried..." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "I remembered the man who worked overtime just to buy me flowers." Blessing looked away briefly. "I remembered the husband who repaired everything in our apartment because he wanted us to save money." She smiled sadly. "I remembered the nights you pretended not to be tired because I wanted to talk." Her voice almost disappeared. "I remembered all the things I ignored." Nobody interrupted her. Chief Edwin quietly looked toward the window, giving his daughter space. Amara wiped her eyes. "I thought money would make me feel secure." She looked directly at Blessing. "I never realized I had already been safe." Blessing folded his hands together. "I'm glad you found clarity." She stared at him. "Is that all you feel?" He answered honestly. I feel many things. She waited. I remember loving you. A tear slipped down her cheek. I remember believing we'd grow old together. Another pause. I remember the day you asked me whether I regretted marrying you. His voice remained calm. And I remember your answer. Amara closed her eyes. I know. I've repeated those words in my mind every day since. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Grace pushed the envelope she had been holding across the table. We brought something. Blessing looked at it, but didn't touch it. What is it? Chief Edwin answered. Nothing complicated. Blessing slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a bank check. The amount was substantial. Chief Edwin spoke quietly. This isn't payment. Blessing looked at him. It isn't charity. Grace nodded. It's simply something we owe you. Blessing looked back down at the check. Then he carefully returned it to the envelope. He slid it gently across the table. I can't accept this. Chief Edwin frowned. Please. No. You deserve it. Blessing smiled kindly. If I accept money to ease someone else's guilt, he gently shook his head. Then both of us lose something. Chief Edwin looked confused. What do we lose? You lose the opportunity to learn that some mistakes cannot be repaired with money. The older man's shoulders slowly dropped. And I lose the peace I've worked so hard to rebuild. No one spoke. Blessing's words carried no accusation, only truth. Chief Edwin slowly took the envelope back. I understand. Blessing nodded. I appreciate the thought. Kelvin looked genuinely puzzled. You aren't angry. Blessing smiled. I was. You were very. He looked around the table, but anger became too heavy to carry. He laughed softly. So one day, I decided to put it down. Chief Edwin quietly shook his head. I wish I had understood that years ago. At that moment, Chief Samuel happened to walk through the reception area on his way to another meeting. He noticed the group sitting together. Instead of interrupting, he simply observed from a respectful distance. After a few moments, he smiled quietly to himself before continuing down the hallway. He had always believed forgiveness revealed strength. Today, Blessing was proving it. Back at the table, Amara picked up the wedding ring. She looked at it for several long seconds. Then she held it toward Blessing. I know I have no right to ask. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. But, she struggled to finish. Is there any chance, Blessing looked at her patiently, that we could ever begin again? The question hung quietly between them. Chief Edwin lowered his head. Grace closed her eyes. Even Kelvin stopped breathing. Blessing looked at the ring, then at Amara. Finally, he spoke. I've forgiven you. Hope immediately appeared in her eyes. But forgiveness, he continued gently, isn't the same as returning. The hope slowly faded. Blessing's expression remained compassionate. The marriage we shared ended the day trust disappeared. Amara's tears flowed freely. I know. I'll always be grateful for the good memories. He smiled softly. And I sincerely hope your future is filled with peace. She lowered her hand. The ring rested once more in her palm. Blessing stood. I should return to work. Everyone slowly rose with him. Chief Edwin extended his hand. Thank you. Blessing shook it firmly. For listening to us. Blessing nodded. Take care of yourselves. With one final polite smile, he turned and walked back toward the elevators. This time, no one tried to stop him. The Okafor family watched in silence as the doors closed behind him. Only after he had disappeared did they truly understand the greatest difference between the man they had once rejected and the man they had met today. His success had changed his circumstances, but his character had never changed at all. Several days passed after the unexpected meeting at Adeyemi Engineering Group. Life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Blessing devoted himself completely to the restructuring project between Adeyemi Engineering Group and Okafor Industrial Holdings. Every recommendation was based on facts, every decision supported by careful analysis, and every conversation conducted with professionalism. Word quietly spread throughout both companies. Employees began noticing changes. Invoices were processed more efficiently. Inventory losses declined. Communication between departments improved. Projects that had been delayed for months slowly returned to schedule. Even people who had never met Blessing started asking the same question. Who introduced these new systems? The answer was always the same: the new operations executive. Chief Samuel watched everything from a distance. One afternoon, he invited Blessing to join him for a walk through the company's community training center, where young apprentices were learning welding, electrical work, and mechanical repair. The sound of machinery echoed through the workshop. Students gathered around instructors, carefully practicing new skills. Chief Samuel smiled. "This is my favorite place." Blessing looked around. "I can understand why." The older man stopped beside a group of apprentices repairing a damaged generator. "They remind me of myself." Blessing smiled. "And me." Chief Samuel glanced toward him. "Do you miss working with your hands?" Blessing looked at the tools spread across the workbench. "Sometimes." He picked up a wrench lying nearby. "I still remember the feeling of repairing an engine that everyone else believed was beyond saving." He carefully set the wrench back down. "It taught me patience." Chief Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "And now you're repairing companies instead of engines." Blessing laughed softly. "I've never thought about it that way." "It isn't very different." The old businessman smiled. "Both require honesty." Later that afternoon, Chief Samuel called an executive committee meeting. Department heads gathered around the conference table. Financial reports showed steady progress. One executive looked genuinely impressed. "The restructuring has exceeded expectations." Another nodded. "Supplier confidence is returning." A third executive added, "Employee morale has improved significantly." Chief Samuel listened quietly before turning toward Blessing. "What do you believe made the biggest difference?" Blessing answered without hesitation. "People." Several executives looked surprised. "The systems matter," he continued calmly. "The budgets matter. The technology matters." He paused. "But none of those things work unless people trust each other." The room fell silent. Chief Samuel smiled proudly. "Exactly." Meanwhile, at Okafor, Industrial Holdings changes were also becoming visible. Chief Edwin gathered senior managers for a weekly review. The atmosphere felt completely different from previous meetings. Instead of blaming employees for mistakes, he asked questions. Instead of making assumptions, he listened. His managers noticed the change immediately. One supervisor cautiously suggested a new inventory process. Previously, Chief Edwin would have dismissed the idea without discussion. This time, he simply asked, "Can you show us how it would work?" The supervisor smiled with relief. "Yes, sir." Kelvin also began changing. He visited manufacturing floors more often. He spoke directly with technicians. He even apologized to several employees he had unfairly criticized in the past. Some were shocked. Others accepted his apology quietly. For the first time, he realized leadership wasn't about demanding respect. It was about earning it. Grace found herself becoming involved in community outreach programs sponsored by the company. She visited vocational schools. She spoke with young women learning technical trades. Listening to their stories reminded her of Blessing. Many came from families with very little money, yet each possessed determination and dignity. One afternoon she quietly admitted to herself, "I judged too many people before knowing them." Amara's journey proved more difficult. She returned to her teaching position at the local primary school. Standing in front of children every morning gave her a sense of purpose she had been missing. Her students knew nothing about wealth, nothing about business, nothing about social status. They simply cared whether someone treated them kindly. One little girl approached her after class. "Teacher Amara." "Yes, my father says the richest people aren't always the happiest." Amara smiled gently. "Your father sounds wise." The child nodded proudly. "He says kind people are easier to live with." After school ended, Amara remained alone in the classroom for several minutes. She quietly repeated the child's words. Kind people are easier to live with. The truth felt painfully familiar. Across town, Blessing visited the modest cemetery where his parents were buried. He carried a small bouquet of white flowers. The afternoon breeze moved gently through the trees. He knelt before the two simple headstones. "It's been a long time." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I wish you could see everything that's happened." He smiled softly. "I think you'd both laugh." A few tears filled his eyes. "When I lost my marriage," he paused, "I believed I'd lost my future." The wind rustled the nearby leaves. "But you raised me to keep walking." He placed the flowers carefully before the graves. "I hope I've made you proud." For several minutes he simply remained there in silence, not asking for anything, only expressing gratitude. As he prepared to leave, his phone rang. It was Chief Samuel. "Blessing." "Good afternoon, sir." "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." "I have some news." Blessing listened. "The board approved our expansion project." "That's wonderful. We'll be opening a new engineering training institute." Blessing smiled. "Congratulations." Chief Samuel chuckled. "There's more. We'd like you to lead it." Blessing stopped walking. "Me? Yes." The older man's voice remained calm. "The institute won't only teach technical skills." He paused. "It will teach leadership, integrity, and responsibility." Blessing felt overwhelmed. "I've never run a school." "You've already been teaching people through your example." Another silence followed. Chief Samuel spoke again. "Think about it. I don't need an answer today." After ending the call, Blessing stood quietly beneath the shade of a large tree. Only months earlier, he had wondered whether anyone would ever believe in him again. Now someone believed in him enough to place the future of hundreds of young people in his hands. He looked toward the clear afternoon sky. Success had given him opportunities. Pain had given him wisdom. Forgiveness had given him peace. As he slowly walked away from the cemetery, he realized that the greatest blessing in his life had never been wealth. It had been becoming the kind of man his parents had always hoped he would be. And that realization prepared him for the final chapter of a journey that had begun with rejection, but was now leading towards something far greater than personal success. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Adeyemi Leadership and Engineering Institute attracted guests from across Lagos. Business leaders arrived alongside engineers, teachers, community volunteers, and dozens of young apprentices who dreamed of building better futures for themselves and their families. A large blue banner stretched across the entrance. "Opportunity begins with character." Those words had been chosen by Blessing, not because they sounded impressive, because they reflected everything he had lived. Inside the auditorium, students filled every seat. Some had grown up in wealthy neighborhoods. Others had come from villages where electricity was still unreliable. Some already held university degrees. Others had never imagined they would receive professional training. Yet, for the first time, they all sat together with the same opportunity before them. Chief Samuel stepped onto the stage first. The audience applauded warmly. He smiled before raising one hand for silence. Many people believe this institute was built to teach engineering. He paused. They are only partly correct. The audience listened attentively. We will teach mathematics. We will teach technology. We will teach project management. He smiled. But those skills alone will never build trustworthy leaders. He turned toward Blessing, who waited quietly beside the stage. The person I am about to introduce reminded me that character remains the strongest foundation any life can have. The applause grew louder as Blessing walked to the podium. He looked across the audience. For a brief moment, he remembered standing alone outside the Okafor mansion, with nothing but a worn travel bag. At that time, he had believed his future had disappeared. Now, hundreds of hopeful faces looked back at him. He smiled. When I was younger, his voice remained calm. I believed success meant reaching the top. He looked around the room. I was wrong. Several students leaned forward. I've learned that success means becoming someone people can trust after you've reached the top. The room became completely quiet. I once repaired broken engines. A few students smiled. People often apologized for bringing me damaged machines. He laughed softly. I used to tell them something. He paused. If it's broken, it can probably be repaired. His smile faded slightly. Years later, life taught me that people are no different. He looked toward the audience. We all make mistakes. We all disappoint someone. We all experience failure. Another pause. But failure doesn't decide your future. The decision to stop trying does. The applause began before he had even finished speaking. After the ceremony ended, dozens of students surrounded Blessing. Some asked about engineering. Others asked about leadership. One young apprentice hesitated before speaking. Sir, Blessing smiled. Yes. My family says I'll never succeed because we're poor. Blessing recognized the pain in the young man's eyes. He placed a reassuring hand on the student's shoulder. Never allow someone else's expectations to become your limits. The student nodded slowly. I'll remember that. I hope you do. Across the courtyard, Chief Samuel watched the conversation with quiet satisfaction. Esther joined him. You chose well. The older man smiled. I didn't choose success. He looked toward Blessing. I chose character. That afternoon, another familiar group quietly entered the institute. Chief Edwin, Grace, Kelvin, and Amara. They had received invitations like every other community partner supporting the institute. There were no reserved seats, no special treatment. They attended simply as guests. Chief Edwin watched Blessing speaking with students and shook his head gently. He belongs here. Grace smiled through moist eyes. He always did. Kelvin nodded. I just couldn't see it. Amara remained silent. She watched Blessing laugh with a group of apprentices repairing a training engine. His smile looked exactly the same as it had years earlier. Only now she understood its value. Eventually, Blessing noticed them. He walked over with the same calm expression he always carried. Welcome. Chief Edwin smiled warmly. Congratulations. Thank you. We wanted to see what you've built. Blessing looked around the campus. It belongs to many people. Chief Edwin shook his head. Perhaps. But your example inspired much of it. Grace stepped forward. I've been volunteering with vocational students. Blessing smiled. I heard. She looked surprised. You did. Chief Samuel mentioned your work. Grace smiled for the first time in many months. I've learned a great deal. I'm glad. Kelvin extended his hand. I wanted to thank you. Blessing shook it firmly. For what? For showing me that leadership begins with humility. Blessing laughed softly. I'm still learning that myself. Finally, Amara stepped forward. The others quietly moved a respectful distance away. I've been teaching full-time again. Blessing smiled. I always thought you were an excellent teacher. She looked down briefly. I've also been trying to become a better person. He nodded gently. I hope you found peace. She met his eyes. I'm finding it. There was no awkwardness between them. Only acceptance. I don't expect anything. She smiled sadly. I just wanted you to know. She paused. That meeting you changed my life. Blessing answered quietly. You changed mine too. She looked surprised. You taught me something important. What? He smiled. That my value could never depend on whether someone else recognized it. Tears filled her eyes again. Thank you. They stood silently for a moment before Amara stepped back. Neither of them needed to say anything more. Some stories were meant to continue together. Others fulfilled their purpose by teaching people who they were meant to become. As the afternoon came to an end, students gathered outside for a group photograph. Chief Samuel insisted that Blessing stand in the center. Blessing tried to refuse. This institute belongs to everyone. The older man laughed. Exactly. That's why you're standing there. Everyone smiled as the photographer prepared the camera. Behind them, the institute's motto stood engraved in polished stone. Opportunity begins with character. Looking around at the students' instructors, business leaders, and community members standing side by side, Blessing realized that losing one chapter of his life had allowed a far greater one to begin. He had once been rejected because he seemed to have nothing. Yet the qualities people overlooked, his honesty, humility, compassion, perseverance, and forgiveness, had become the very things that transformed his future. True wealth had never started with money. It had started with the kind of person he chose to be when life gave him every reason to become someone else. And in the end, that was the legacy he hoped every student leaving the institute would carry with them long after they forgot his name.